Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into the medieval world's creepiest after-hours shift, fighting off ghosts, witches, and nightmares, without electricity, Netflix, or even garlic bread for moral support. This isn't the stuff of your uncle's weird ghost stories after too many beers. This is what real medieval people did when the sun set, and suddenly every chill, creak, and weird dream felt like Satan applying for tenants' rights in your haystack. But before we fend off ancient poltergeists with little more than garlic breath, a wooden spoon, and pure anxiety, please take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of weird, cozy misery. Drop a comment. Did your grandma actually teach you a ghost-repelling ritual, or just freak you out with tales of haunted kitchen utensils? Now, dim the lights, switch on that fan for white noise, and tuck yourself into bed. Not just because it's comforting, but because if you lived in 1381, you definitely want your feet covered. Pause for a second. Have you ever wondered if you'd make it through a medieval night without accidentally marrying a witch, mistaking indigestion for demon possession, or blaming the neighbor's goat for your recurring nightmares? When insomnia meant the devil is touching your dreams. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the year 1392. Your house is one stiff breeze from collapse. Your neighbors are accusing their cows of sorcery, and you're about to discover why medieval bedtime was basically a horror movie marathon with worse snacks. The fire's gone out and your candle has finally fizzled, because that's what happens when the only light you can afford is 40% tallow and 60% pure desperation. Everything is black, but not the comforting, Netflix black. This is the kind of black that makes you wonder if the cat is breathing on your toes, or if it's something significantly less huggable. Every pop from the cooling hearth becomes a hand in the dark. Welcome to the witching hour, population, you, and literally everything your imagination can conjure. Here, in the vacuum left by the last flicker of light, the room loses its familiar edges. The gentle haze that once softened the corners of your life now dissolves, and suddenly the wallpaper patterns you always thought a bit too quaint reveal themselves as hieroglyphics for some unspeakable cult. You try not to notice the draft on your neck, but your brain catalogues it anyway. Possibly a ghost, possibly an escapee from your laundry basket, most likely a draft, but now is not the time for rational thinking. You tell yourself, with the dignified confidence of a child in an ill-fitting superhero costume, that you're perfectly safe. You rehearse it, out loud, quietly, then loudly again as if volume grants control over shadow. But the night doesn't negotiate. The witching hour does not care for your arguments, or for evidence, or for your increasingly desperate attempts to locate your phone flashlight without exposing an appendage outside the safety perimeter of your blanket fort. Still, the mind is an untamed thing at this hour. It sprints effortlessly from childhood goblins to the adult panic of unpaid electric bills. Shadows swirl, transforming common household shapes into elaborate monsters. The chair by the window? It is definitely plotting something. The grandfather clock in the hallway, silent by day, chooses this exact moment to creak, stretching its ancient bones as if to remind you that time is a living, breathing adversary. Even the beloved family cat, a source of comfort in daylight, becomes a cryptid, eyes gleaming with secrets and tail flicking with ill-contained mischief. Out in the hallway, pipes settle with mournful sighs, and suddenly you remember every ghost story you scoffed at in broad daylight. One by one, the logical explanations you'd stockpiled vanish, and all that's left is the ancient magic of being afraid of the dark. Your heart performs a virtuosic drum solo in your chest. Each beat seems designed to attract whatever spectral audience might be passing through. There are rituals for this hour, most of them invented on the spot. The strategic wriggling deeper under blankets, the holding of breath until the imagined footsteps pass, the mental inventory of items nearby that could be used as weapons, a shoe, a book, a flashlight of uncertain battery life. Somewhere outside, a fox screams, and you decide, just for tonight, that it's probably better not to investigate. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but self-preservation keeps you firmly in place. Eventually, if you're lucky, you'll remember the ancient wisdom. Monsters like their humans better asleep. Eyes squeezed shut, you take shallow breaths, trying not to disturb the darkness any further. Maybe, just maybe, if you become motionless enough, the night will pass you by in search of livelier prey. So you wait, half awake, half dreaming. The line between the two blurs, and the familiar returns, slow and shy. The world outside is still and, within the shell of your room, warmth seeps back into your bones. Tomorrow morning, the whole ordeal will seem faintly ridiculous. But for now, welcome to the witching hour, a time when shadows loom large, and imagination is the truest monster of all. It starts with a groan from the rafters. Just the wood settling, everyone told you. But did they say that to the last family, before they all ran screaming into the woods? Try not to overthink the scratching, or the wheezing, or that suspiciously regular thump. Now, imagine you're settling into your straw mattress. Let's be honest, it's mostly bugs holding hands. And right as your mind is about to surrender to sleep, the house begins its nightly concert. First, the sure sign of impending doom, a soft scurrying behind the wall. It could be a rodent. It could be a demon. Maybe it's a rodent possessed by a demon. Medieval logic was flexible like that, and so begins the immortal game of medieval anxiety bingo. Let's go down the squares. Is it a banshee? A restless spirit? Or something more mundane, like, say, your neighbor's goat getting the midnight munchies in your pantry again? Each sound is a potential apocalypse. In a time before scientific explanations soothed the nerves, every croak, scratch, trundle, or moan came with a deeply satisfying what-if attached. The church bells may have tolled at noon, but it's the night that rang with the truest mysteries. What gave the night its power? For starters, darkness wasn't just a lack of light. It was practically another dimension, one where the border between the living and whatever else was supposed to be out there grew thin. Super comforting. Let us not forget the weather. Oh, the weather. Wind didn't just rattle window shutters. It was a malevolent force capable of carrying voices, or the scent of witchcraft, straight through your keyhole. And a sudden gust during prayers? Definitely a sign. Lightning wasn't a simple atmospheric discharge. No, it was frequently interpreted as a celestial warning shot, just missing the thatched roof you'd spent so many miserable hours patching. But it wasn't just the supernatural that got medieval pulses racing. Everyday anxieties played their own nocturnal games. Did someone remember to bar the door? Was the pig pen secured? Had the bread been stored away from the rats? Or would you discover a carb-based massacre in the morning? Household safety and personal survival walked hand in hand with spiritual dread. As the candle gutters low, your mind races. Can you bet your immortal soul on that odd drip being rain and not spectral drool? Even pets joined in the fun. Dogs that howled in the night weren't just annoying. They were harbingers of death or war, depending on the breed, the region, and how many bedtime stories you'd regrettably overheard. Birds flying at odd hours must be witches on assignment, or souls in transit. Don't even ask what people thought about cats. And for those who think our ancestors' imaginations were childish, remember, these nighttime fears weren't all in their heads. In a world without alarm systems or streetlights, actual thieves, wild animals, or angry neighbors could just as easily break in under cover of darkness. Sometimes, anxiety was simply the brain's way of doing risk assessment with very limited data. So when you next stare up at the ceiling, listening to tile creak or a heater whistle, spare a kindly thought for your medieval predecessors. They too battled the symphonic terrors of the night, armed only with prayer, superstition, and a noise-based scoring system that made every hour chance to fill out one terrifying bingo card. Sleep tight. Your medieval bed is straw stuffed into a sack that smells like old onions and fear. It does not matter if you sleep alone, there's always space for a ghost, a goblin, or a neighbor taking shelter from her own haunted goose. The theory is, if you sleep in a circle of blessed herbs and occasionally mutter prayers, you might only have weird dreams, not wild supernatural visitations. The bed is not a private sanctuary. It's a communal experiment between you, your vaguely cursed furniture, and whatever else happens to drift in after dark. You might call it a nest, if nests were drafty, itchy, and occasionally haunted by distant relatives. Some nights there's safety in the musty closeness of your straw bundle, especially when winds whip through the timbers and wolves howl outside. Other nights, it's as if your mattress has become a kind of supernatural flypaper. Ghosts, cold, muttering, with a faint scent of moldy bread, seem magnetized to the uneasy dreams of the living. It's not just your imagination, and it's certainly not just ghosts. The medieval bed is a sponge for every kind of visitor, spectral or otherwise. A neighbor might climb in without warning, her own cottage recently declared unclean for sleeping thanks to a goose with a demonic glint in its eye. Then there's your cousin, fleeing the family crone and her collection of medicinal eels, looking for a safe place to nap. Sometimes, there's an entire second family under the blankets, seeking warmth, protection, and a good spot to argue about whose turn it is to chase out the rat with the bell. The line between my bed and the village waiting area is as thin as the linen on your only shirt. Privacy, as you define it, is a luxury reserved mainly for the local lord, or the village idiot, who talks to his boots and is left alone out of respect and mild fear. You adapt. Your pillow is a wooden block. It may not cradle your dreams with comfort, but it's hard and reliable, the medieval version of emotional support. Suppose, however, you actually manage some sleep. The bed, which by daylight appears merely dilapidated, becomes treacherous at midnight. Anything could be crawling inside, fleas performing acrobatic routines, spiders with ambitions, lice with delusions of grandeur. Even the straw seems to shift of its own accord, rustling ominously when you move. Of course, your best hope is that it's just vermin, and not the spirit of Gertrude from 2 cottages over. She did love to gossip and hasn't let death cramp her social calendar. Locals have developed rituals for bedtime resilience. Tuck rosemary and sage under the pillow, circle the bed thrice, spit out the window for good measure. Occasionally, you're startled awake by invisible cold hands kneading your shoulders, but it's rarely worse than that, as long as you remember your herbs and the vital rule: never, ever leave your toes uncovered. For children, tales abound of haunted beds and mischievous sprites, all designed to encourage good behavior and staying under the covers. Some of these stories aren't so much cautionary as they are instructional guides to surviving the night. Don't whistle in bed, don't turn your back to the moonlight, always sleep with a bit of salt near your head. It's assumed these steps keep nightmares at bay. Or, at the very least, make you an unappetizing target. In short, the medieval bed is less a place to rest and more an ever-changing battleground. If you wake up groggy and sore, or with half your hair missing, take comfort in this: you survived another round. You might not be refreshed, but you're a little wiser about the world of invisible bedfellows, human and otherwise. And if you ever do get a night of true rest, count yourself luckier than most, haunted goose and all. Medieval wisdom says evil spirits hate cleanliness, which is terribly convenient because you haven't bathed in weeks. With a splash of holy water and a prayer, your nightly face wipe does double duty, preventing zits and repelling low-rent demons. It's like skincare, but with extra existential dread thrown in. Back in the medieval ages, personal hygiene was a chancy affair. Sure, kings and queens bathed occasionally, sometimes even monthly, in luxurious wooden tubs filled with tepid water and aromatics. But for most commoners, soap was rare, baths were infrequent, and a whiff of earthiness was simply part of your personal brand. The logic, however, was crystal clear to anyone afraid of things that go bump in the night. Dirt clings to you, but so do spirits, and one makes you only slightly more popular at the tavern than the other. Of course, bathing was rarely a solitary act of enjoyment. Oh no, cleanliness was basically a holy ritual. Monasteries had strict bathing schedules, not so their monks could enjoy spa days, but to scrub away demons as well as dead skin. In some monasteries, bathing before major religious festivals was practically a minor exorcism, a warning to any clinging ghosts that it's time to vacate your armpits. But what about the rest of the public, those without access to monastic bathhouses or endless barrels of rosewater? Let's just say the average medieval citizen's skincare routine was improvisational. Bathing meant risking your reputation or, worse, your immortal soul. There were whispers, spread mostly by people who didn't own any soap, that excessive bathing could make you vulnerable. Open pause? Open invitation for trickster spirits, they warned. The truly cautious might skip the bath altogether and stick to wiping their faces, or occasionally hands, with holy water and muttered prayers, creating the world's most low-budget spa treatment. To drive out any evil lingering on the skin, the church prescribed a few added steps. Plain water might wash away the dirt, but it took consecrated water to scare away the supernatural. The rich, in a show of piety, and a healthy dose of showing off, might add a splash of fragrant herbs or drops of sacred oil. This not only left you smelling slightly less like boiled turnips, but also, according to urban legend, rendered your aura completely undetectable to passing wraiths. For children, Hygiene became part spiritual boot camp, part health necessity. Parents might scrub their offspring with lye soap while reciting protection prayers, just in case a restless poltergeist considered hitching a ride to school. Became less about nagging and more about life or death ghost logistics. Bath time tales included stories of impish spirits lurking in the grime behind one's ears, best banished with a good scrub and a hearty recitation of the Lord's Prayer. As for adults, especially those with jobs near the supernatural, like gravediggers, night watchmen, or the local exorcist in training, they developed elaborate protective cleansing rituals. Imagine a late-night bathing sequence featuring candles, whispered chants, and a robust lather. But let's be honest, when plague came knocking, priorities changed. Bathhouses sometimes closed, either in an attempt to halt disease or out of fear that they were haunted, bathhouse apparitions being surprisingly common in local legends. Those desperate for hygiene might sneak in after dark, clutching a sprig of rosemary and reciting psalms like a magical incantation, which, to be fair, is a better spa playlist than most. And so, in between outbreaks, weddings, and the threat of being possessed for not cleaning your toes, medieval hygiene remained a mysterious blend of medical advice and folktale warning. Every splash of water was both a small rebellion against the filth outside and a superstitious shield against the darkness lurking just out of sight, a cleansing of the body and the soul. If your skin glowed faintly after a ritual clean, was it health, or just the ghosts giving up and moving down the street? Either way, pass the soap, and the holy water, just in case. The menu for banishing night terrors isn't what you hoped it'd be. Garlic hangs above your door, and stale bread is tucked under the bed, to trick ghosts into thinking you're already too poor to haunt. If you're lucky, your medieval snacks won't attract rats, or worse, something that appreciates the smell of sanctified carbs. It's midnight, and your stomach isn't the only thing rumbling. Every creak of the old floorboards sends your thoughts spiraling. Was that just the wind, or something pulling itself through the keyhole, undeterred by garlic garlands and crusty loaves? No matter. You clutch your holy water, feeling every drop slosh in the cheap pewter vial you picked up, supposedly blessed, but probably just tap water from a highly distracted priest. Medieval wisdom, if you can call it that, hovers somewhere between culinary tragedy and spiritual improved. Folk remedies promised that nothing malevolent could bear the scent of garlic, but after 3 nights of this, you suspect that nothing benevolent can bear your room, either. Friends have stopped dropping by, your dog edge of sneers every time you open your mouth. The good news is, there's no sign of a vampire. The bad news? The only one suffering here is you. Your nightly ritual grows in complexity. First, sprinkle a protective ring of salt, careful not to spill anywhere your socks might find it later. Still etched in blue wax. The light flickers dramatically, casting shadows that elongate and twist, until even the coat on your chair starts looking like a medieval wraith with a grudge. It's time for the pièce de résistance, a slice of garlic bread, carefully placed at your bedside like some unholy offering. You reason that, if the undead do stop by tonight, at least you've put out the good stuff. But as you lay down, you realize you're not entirely sure which you fear more, the undead, or the indigestion you'll have by sunrise. By now, your room smells like an oddball blend of an Italian restaurant, a church basement, and mild existential panic. You try to remember if you read about saints ever protecting people from demonic reflux. With one hand, you clutch your pillow, with the other, your vial of holy water. You're ready for whatever comes. At least, that's what you tell yourself before every shadow seems to pulse and breathe. Every medieval precaution comes with side effects. Breadcrumbs in the bed, for example, are a strong attractor for every pest within a half-mile radius. You swear there used to be fewer spiders in the corner. All of which is fine, you tell yourself, as long as none of them have a taste for sanctified wheat. Not that you're entirely alone in your panic. You imagine your ancestors, centuries ago, doing the exact same thing, cowering under musty blankets, surrounded by dubious snacks, praying that the only thing that comes in the night is sleep. Maybe this is the real shared experience, not the threat of monsters, but the collective hope that garlic and faith are somehow enough. As you lie awake, heartbeat counting out the seconds, every superstition feels simultaneously ridiculous and necessary. Rational thought says you should probably just invest in a better lock, or at least throw out the garlic before your landlord files a complaint. But at midnight, logic wilts under the weight of fear, and you go through the motions once again. Salt, bread, water, prayer. The holy trinity of not dying before dawn. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll find the courage to sleep without your defensive buffet in place. But tonight? Tonight, you'll side with the ancient wisdom. Better to face tomorrow with dragon breath than to face the unknown without ritual. And so, swaddled in crumbs and candlelight, you wait out the night, hoping your midnight snacks are enough for both the supernatural and your nerves. Nothing says peaceful sleep like vague reassurance that Grandma's ghost is just a stone's throw away, probably critiquing your snoring. But let's pause for a moment and consider, was proximity to the graveyard really so bad? If you leaf through the pages of medieval records, you'll see that being near a churchyard was actually a badge of honor. The dead were cleverly placed at the heart of the living community, so you couldn't really escape your ancestors' watchful eye or their questionable opinions on your window box plants. For some, this was nothing short of romantic. Imagine a nightly stroll under the stars, the church bell tolling softly, fireflies blinking around the ancient stones. Your neighbors might be quiet, but the atmosphere is unbeatable. That said, not everyone waxed poetic about having a front row seat to the afterlife. According to chroniclers of the day, graveyards weren't just parking lots for the pious. They were busy places. Livestock grazed there, local youths cut through them on their way to school, and marketplace overflow sometimes spilled onto the very plots where last week's dearly departed found eternal rest. Suddenly, the image of a peaceful, somber resting place kind of crumbles. Still, there was a certain practicality to this arrangement. If you had a family member in need of spiritual assistance, or maybe just someone who owed you money beyond the grave, you only had to step outside to pay them a visit. Some townsfolk claimed this proximity kept the living modest and the dead remembered. No one forgot Aunt Mildred was watching if her tombstone literally blocked your view of the sunrise. Of course, nightly walks had their pitfalls. Superstition ran rampant. Graveyard-adjacent homes were prime real estate if you were hoping for ghostly encounters, but terrifying if your imagination ran wild after sundown. Every creaky timber, every draft, every tap at the window could be interpreted as a spectral guest. You'd better lock your doors, or, worse, your pantry. And did people worry about hygiene, you ask? Townsfolk generally trusted in divine providence and the cleansing powers of fresh air, but every now and again, the pungent aroma of earthly remains would stir up debate at the local alehouse. This led to uneasy moments in the summer months when the wind changed direction. If location, location, location had been an early estate agent slogan, you can bet upwind of the graveyard would have fetched a premium. Fast forward to today, and you'll notice that this quaint medieval urban planning has left a patchwork of villages and towns where homes snuggle right up to ancient burial grounds. Modern buyers sometimes view this as morbid, but others fall in love with the strange serenity. There's a unique romance to impermanence whispering through your garden patio, and perhaps even a sense of community with those who have, quite literally, gone before. So, was having a graveyard next door romantic or horrifying? In truth, it was both, a sweet, shivery reminder that life was lived with death close at hand, but not always in fear. Whether the thought comforts or unsettles you probably depends on your tolerance for midnight whispers and the odd moonlit shadow on the lawn. Just remember, if you wake up to find your flowers rearranged, it could be the wind, or just Grandma giving you gardening tips from beyond the veil. When the milk sours or the well dries up, it's time for an emergency council meeting. Who's the local witch this week? You drift off to sleep hoping it's not you, even as you count all the weird things you did today, picked herbs, left bread out, sneezed ominously. Living in a medieval village was a bit like starring in a never-ending reality show where everyone's favorite pastime was seeing who'd be voted off the island, but with a lot more pitchforks. Trouble was, the criteria for being witchy were almost as random as medieval dental hygiene. Bake your bread a little too crusty, have a mole in the wrong place, or dare to own an independent thought. Congrats, you've qualified for the witch shortlist. Even looking just a little bit off was enough to put you under suspicious scrutiny, and unfortunately, nobody cared about your defense. It was straight to public speculation, fueled by gossip and that one nosy neighbor who's always peering through her shutters. Part of the thrill and terror of this medieval witch hunt was how completely ordinary grievances could transform into supernatural allegations. Did your neighbor's cow stop giving milk? Clearly, You must have hexed it with your sinister potato peeling technique. Was there an unexpected hailstorm? Don't look now, but word on the cobblestones is you once muttered something grumpy at the sky. In a small, suspicious community, cause and effect didn't stand a chance against the raw power of a juicy rumor. Witch hunts also brought the community a sense of order and unity, just the really bleak kind. After all, nothing brings people together quite like a good, old-fashioned scapegoat. Folks who rarely agreed on anything could suddenly rally around a common cause: paranoia. It didn't even matter if the accused was Grandma, who doles out cookies and unsolicited advice, or Farmer Giles, whose only crime is odd socks and an unfortunate dental situation. As soon as something went awry, everyone turned amateur detective, ready to air every petty grievance you ever committed, including stealing extra stew at last spring's feast. But this wasn't purely a medieval pastime. Keeping tabs on the different ones served real, if twisted, social functions. Witch accusations often settled scores, kept people in line, or got rid of anyone just inconvenient enough to disrupt the status quo. The less power you had, poor, female, or otherwise marginalized, the likelier it was you'd wake up to find yourself under suspicion. In other words, the witch hunt was the world's worst version of peer review, and even passing meant your life could be ruined. Of course, behind the drama was a deep undercurrent of fear. Without science to explain ruined crops or weird rashes, people filled the gaps with magic, and then panicked about who might be wielding it. Did the harvest fail? Couldn't possibly be bad weather or pests. Someone with a twitchy eye probably cursed the fields. The village's communal desperation for control over the uncontrollable turned innocent oddballs into sinister threats. What better way to feel powerful than to point fingers and watch someone else squirm? So every evening, the so-called neighborhood watch put aside rational thought, gathered for some light torch brandishing, and set about solving mysteries with all the subtlety of a goat in a pottery shop. Their goal? Ultimately, medieval community witch hunting was less about actual magic and more about the fragile, anxious bonds of small-town life. If you couldn't explain the world, at least you could control the narrative, one accusation at a time. And so everyone slept with one eye open, hoping tomorrow's emergency council meeting would have a new name atop its list. Just, please, not yours. Hoping to avoid attention from demons, people spend a lot of time muttering rote prayers and counting off saint names like sheep. Inevitably, you forget which prayer was supposed to repel insomnia and which one just makes the cat angry. Sleep will probably come if you just keep going long enough, or possibly if you pass out from boredom. This ritual, for most, has less to do with faith and more to do with sheer, dogged persistence. A devotional marathon where the finish line is, ideally, unconsciousness. The logic is simple: if you can flood the room with enough glory biz and St. Alexander's, maybe whatever's lurking in the chimney will get tired before you do. If not, at least you can say you tried, and there's a satisfying sense of accomplishment in ticking off all 17 saints you can remember. Bonus points if you did it in the right order, and double points if you resisted the urge to add St. Garfield, just to see if God is paying attention. It's a noisy process, too. Counting your blessings isn't a silent, gentle act. It's a full-contact sport involving hurried whispers, clacking rosary beads, and the occasional muffled yawn. Sometimes you discover new liturgical gymnastics, like listing every cousin, pet, and inanimate object you've ever loved, thanking the heavens in one long, breathless, run-on blessing. The walls, naturally, don't respond. Nor do the demons, hopefully. That is the desired outcome, but the cat might hiss or look at you like you've interrupted something important. Should you accidentally repeat a saint's name, Saint Lucy, for instance, twice in a row, panic will briefly replace fatigue. Is this a sign you're extra blessed, or is it, as your grandma warned, an instant ticket for the fiendish insomnia demon to worm into your pillowcase? Either way, you restart the litany, more alert this time, not so much out of fear but a competitive instinct to win at prayer. There is, surprisingly, a comfort in this chaos. The act of blessing, listing, and praying becomes its own lullaby, a way to push back the dark. These routines connect you to all the other people in town, mumbling the same names into the same starless night, not because they're certain the saints are listening, but because the alternative, silence, feels like inviting something to answer back. If nothing happens, nothing creaks, and nothing whispers, then the system is working as intended. In the morning, there's no applause, no certificate of spiritual achievement, just a vague satisfaction that nobody was possessed overnight and the house remains blessed, albeit slightly sticky with holy water. You drag yourself from bed groggy and triumphant, convinced that even if your prayers did nothing metaphysical, the sheer volume and invention were probably enough to scare off anything with a trace of malice or an aversion to repetition. Some people, of course, take the exercise further, expanding their nocturnal lists to include modern saints. Is this sacrilege? Maybe. But in a nightly game of superstitious survival, the rules are flexible, and humor is as potent as any relic. If laughter repels demons, the house is doubly fortified. Yet for all the spectacle, there's a kernel of genuine gratitude at the core. In the act of counting your blessings, awkwardly, exhaustively, and yes, sometimes loudly, you find and name the things worth keeping close. For tonight, at least, there is something holy in the muttering, a patchwork of memory, faith, and a stubborn refusal to let the darkness have the last word. Bad dreams in the Middle Ages are a big deal. Wake up sweaty, instantly blame evil spirits, and maybe wake your spouse to spit 3 times into the fire for luck. Your dreams are less about repressed feelings and more about literal, demon-driven campaigns. Sigmund Freud is not scheduled to arrive for another 500 years, so good luck with that unresolved psychic trauma. Nightmares weren't just a personal inconvenience, they were practically a communal emergency. Picture this: you bolt upright, clutching at your straw-stuffed pillow, and start reciting prayers at warp speed. There's a very real fear that what you dreamed, say, flying 3-headed goats or dining with skeletons, could actually be a glimpse into a spiritual battlefield raging over your very soul. Forget about dream dictionaries telling you what an ocean means. Here, a nightmare is either a warning straight from heaven or, more likely, a mischievous demon poking around your subconscious, looking for a foothold. Everyone, from peasant to king, had an opinion on exactly where nightmares came from. Some folks swore by the old hag theory, that is, a malicious spirit, often imagined as a heavy old woman, who sits on your chest and squeezes the breath out of you as you sleep. Others insisted it must be the fault of unholy air sneaking in through the windows, Q shuttering the room and hanging up pungent herbs, because nothing says demon repellent like sleeping in a bedroom that smells like a medieval salad bar. You've also got to account for the medical experts of the day, who bring their own distinct medieval logic to the slumber party. According to humoral theory, the all-chemistry's philosophy of the time, eating too much cheese, bread, or rich stew before bed will absolutely invite nightmares. Hot, damp foods supposedly fester inside your guts until your brain gets confused and starts sending you warning signals in the form of terrifying images. In this system, ghosts, ghouls, and indigestion all just variations on the same basic problem. Your bodily fluids are out of whack, and now you're dreaming about hellhounds. Dreams, after all, are serious business. If you're a monk or nun, you might be woken up by a nightmare and immediately wind up confessing to the prior, trying to recall if you skipped any prayers, or perhaps mumbled the wrong psalm. For the average village dweller, you're reporting your nightmare at breakfast with the kind of drama normally reserved for plague outbreaks and harvest failures. The local wise woman, if she's not busy curing warts, will explain that you've likely been targeted by a witch from a rival village. You always did suspect those folks from 2 hills over. That's where the fun really begins. Treatments. Medieval self-care. Dream edition. Remove lurking demons with nightly routines such as washing your face in holy water, tucking a tiny relic under your pillow, and, for the anxious overachievers, chanting psalms backward, extra points if you can do it without getting tongue-tied and attracting even more spirits. And if all else fails, simply rearrange your sleeping position. Medieval logic dictates that sleeping on your right side is safer for the soul. Left side? May as well send an invitation to the underworld. But through it all, this sweaty, candlelit nocturnal drama, there's a kind of weird comfort. Nightmares are universal. They bind you to your neighbors, your ancestors, even those suspicious monks across the river. You compare stories, share remedies, and bond over the shared belief that the unseen world is never far away, especially after dark. Sure, it's not Freud's manifest content and latent content, but medieval dream logic gives everyone something to talk or worry about over breakfast. So next time you wake at midnight convinced you're being chased by a spectral chicken, just remember, in the Middle Ages, you're in good company. The only thing scarier than the dream is running out of spit for the fire, or worse, having to explain your dream to your neighbors, who will absolutely bring it up at next Sunday's feast. Every village has a rumor. On Tuesdays, and, just to be safe, Fridays and Sundays, the witches gather on the hill to ride goats and swap bread recipes. You fall asleep worrying that your midnight snack is a secret invitation to the next broomstick potluck. Try not to drool on your pillow, it's technically witch bait. Of course, most people will tell you they don't believe in such things. They say, always a little too loud, glancing nervously at the window as they bolt it shut. No one admits to peeking out, but by morning, every curtain has clearly been tugged aside. The whispers run through the village like a chilly wind. Yes, that was a cackle you heard last night. Yes, the neighbor's goat definitely has a perm. The peculiarity of Tuesday nights has woven itself into every local superstition. Grandmothers pile salt on windowsills, just in case. Cats are corralled indoors early, and bread is never left cooling on a windowsill after the sun dips behind the hills. Only the truly foolish or truly forgetful will wander the lanes after twilight, and if they do, they're likely to show up the next morning with a dazed expression and suspiciously flour-dusted boots. The heart of the myth, of course, is the hill itself. Under the cover of darkness, every mossy boulder casts a longer, stranger shadow. The old yew tree at its crown is said to have been struck by lightning, 3 times, for emphasis, and its trunk bears scars that, if you squint, do look a bit like dancing women. Children dare each other to creep up its slopes and retrieve a token, a fallen leaf, a feather, a pebble warm from the earth, but almost no one makes it past the creaking gate. And yet, for all the anxiety, Tuesday is the village's most productive day. Shops open early, fields are weeded with extra vigor, and no one lingers too long at breakfast. The sense of foreboding lends everyone an industrious air. Industriousness, in the countryside, is just anxiety with a hat on. By dusk, the last chores are hurriedly finished before the collective curfew sets in, and the village tucks itself safely away with a final, nervous double-check of the lock. Still, some insist the Sabbaths are very real, just not in the way the stories tell it. The elderly herbalist down the lane smirks at the idea of goat riding, bad for the posture, dear, but won't let anyone see her behind the cottage after sundown. A few of the best loaves at the weekly market always have a faintly smoky aroma, as though they've been baked over a bonfire on a windy hilltop. And every so often, a cluster of unusually contented toads will appear in the parish fountain on Wednesday morning. But perhaps the strangest thing about Witches' Sabbath is what it does to the imagination. For every tale of cackling hags and arcane rites, there are just as many gentle ones, witches sharing herbal tea, giggling over the latest village gossip, or teaching each other a new scone recipe beneath a full moon. As if, when the world grows quiet and dark, it's easier to believe in magic, and in the possibility that even your most peculiar neighbors are just in need of a little company. So if you find yourself lying awake on a Tuesday night, watching moonlight slip across your bedroom wall, remember, it's not wrong to be wary. But it's also not wrong to wonder if, somewhere nearby, a coven of kind-hearted bakers is simply enjoying a well-earned night off. In the end, Tuesday might just be weird, so we never forget how easily the ordinary becomes extraordinary, if you only let your imagination wander into the night. Your cat is both mouse control and mysterious nighttime shenanigans in one crunchy package. You're left wondering whether it's repelling evil or summoning a spirit with its weird, unblinking stare. Either way, you're not getting up to find out. Throughout history, humans and cats have maintained a peculiar relationship that wobbles somewhere between pragmatic partnership and a barely disguised mutual fascination. Sure, felines moved in to patrol our granaries for mice, but it wasn't long before their insistent purring, inscrutable eyes, and I meant to knock that over attitude elevated them from simple pest control agents to almost mystical household presences. Ask an ancient Egyptian, a cat wasn't just tolerated, it was revered, accessorized, and, in some dynasties, even mummified for the afterlife. To imagine what your cat is thinking as it carefully slides your favorite mug off the counter, well, that's a tradition thousands of years old. Fast forward to the medieval period and the plot thickens, sometimes with fur and the smell of burnt toast. In folklore and witch trial testimony alike, cats regularly take center stage. The familiar, that famous supernatural sidekick, is usually a black cat with opinions on everything and the ability to disappear exactly when you need a witness. If you've ever watched your kitty squint at nothing in the corner, or zoom through the house as if chasing invisible sprites, you can't help but wonder if these stories were onto something. There's magic in that housebound beast, even if the only sorcery it's performing is suddenly teleporting from the windowsill to the forbidden bookshelf. The best part about cats is their quiet companionship, how they park themselves beside your laptop, purring encouragement, or possibly trying to type ASF Jekyll across your important work email. Cats have the unique power to make us feel seen and ignored at the same time. They'll curl up on your lap, blink up at you with those mysterious, slow-motion winks, and give you a little nudge, as if to say, yes, you're special. Yet, the duality persists. Science has done its best to demystify the household feline. We know now about their acute hearing, their predatory instincts, and their tendency to weave through our legs not for luck but to mark us as theirs. Still, science hasn't quite managed to kill the legend. There's a certain delicious ambiguity in not knowing whether your cat is simply looking for crunches or communing with the spirit realm when it stares into the void behind your fridge. Maybe that's why so many creative minds, from Edgar Allan Poe to internet meme generators, keep returning to the cat as muse or mystery. They embody contradiction, fiercely independent, yet startlingly affectionate, solitary stalkers, yet loyal kin. They're both the familiar and the friend, the fur-clad observer of your midnight snack and, possibly, the first line of defense against gremlins, phantoms, or just the next-door dog's loud breathing. In the end, whether your cat is repelling curses, summoning spirits, or just keeping an eye on your sandwich, what matters is that you share your home with a creature as ancient as myth and as immediate as a paw tapping at your cheek. Baffling, comforting, and always a bit mischievous, the cat is both ordinary and otherworldly. And if you choose to believe your midnight companion is part protective familiar, part devoted friend, well, who's to say you're wrong? After all, the cat isn't confessing. A sprig of rosemary under the pillow for pleasant dreams. A bowl of salt in each corner for protection. Sleep with your feet facing the doorway or never face the doorway, nobody remembers which. The amount of contradictory advice in the Middle Ages makes you wonder if every ghost is just as confused as you are. If you ever stumbled across medieval advice columns, you'd think the world was permanently under siege by the supernatural. Their nightmares vanished. Superstition was less about logic and more about throwing everything at the wall, then praying at least one thing would stick. Number 1. Rosemary under the pillow. Rosemary was the Swiss Army knife of medieval herbs, good for wards, weddings, and, in a pinch, masking the scent of a corpse awaiting burial. Placed under your pillow, it was believed to promote peaceful sleep and discourage nightmares, or at least ensure you dreamed of robust Italian cooking. The result? Mostly, flattened herbs and a faintly herbaceous aroma to confuse your subconscious. Nightmares, meanwhile, seemed unimpressed by botany. Number 2. Salt in the corners. Salt, that ancient symbol of purity and preservation, was scattered in the corners of the bedroom to form a protective barrier. The logic: no evil spirit could cross unseasoned mineral. While helpful for keeping snails away, salt's effect on nightmare creatures appears tragically limited, unless said creature's primary weakness was hypertension. Number 3. Doorway dilemmas. Instructions here depend on location, year, or the moon. Some warn, always sleep with feet pointing toward the doorway so you can leave quickly, or never do so, lest you invite fate, and your soul, to wander. Inconsistent as these superstitions may be, the real winner is indecision-induced insomnia as you spend delicious hours rearranging furniture. Number 4. Iron beneath the bed. Swords, knives, or even horseshoes under your bed act as an ironclad deterrent, for gals apparently allergic to blacksmith work. Alternatively, the ever-present fear of accidentally stabbing your own foot in the dark works as a natural sleep inhibitor. Number 5. Nightcaps, the drink, not the hat. A nighttime hot toddy, ale, or medicinal wine was said to keep terrors at bay and bring restful slumber. Sometimes, it simply brought snoring and vivid, drunken dreams about riding a goose into Valhalla. Still, of all the methods, this one is most likely to catch on at present-day sleepovers. Number 6. Protective charms and amulets. Worn around the neck, balanced on the nose, or pinned to your pillow, these charms ranged from lumps of amber to teeth instead of pearls. Accidentally swallowing your good luck tooth amulet was considered unlucky, though nothing compared to waking up beside it in the morning. Number 7. Prayers and invocations. Some earnestly recited prayers, invoking saints, angels, or occasionally, famous local hermits. Length of prayer increased with perceived risk. Unfortunately, nightmares proved indifferent to verbosity and holy intent when faced with a mind full of half-remembered Latin. Number 8. Drawing a circle. Chalk on the floor, string under the mattress, or even circles traced with a stick, all in the hope of cordoning off evil dreams like sheep at a county fair. Results: circles drawn, nightmares undeterred, and medieval apartment dwellers perpetually annoyed by chalk dust. Number 9. No cheese before bed. A preventative measure that persists to this day. Unfortunately, all evidence points to stories of cheese-induced nightmares being the invention of parents desperate to protect the family stockpile of hard gouda. Number 10. Never talk about nightmares. The most pragmatic advice: if you don't mention them, perhaps they don't exist. This is the ancient precursor to Don't Feed the Trolls, only with more malicious phantasms and fewer internet memes. In summary, for every folk remedy, there's an equal and opposite counter-remedy. No combination of herbs, salts, or amulets could guarantee a night free from bad dreams. But perhaps all these antics, ridiculous as they seem, bring comfort when facing the unknown, even if it's only the reassurance that you're doing something, anything, in the battle against the darkness. After all, what's scarier, a nightmare, or a sleepless night spent rearranging your bedroom according to instructions nobody quite remembers? The only thing more chilling than waking up to the wind is hearing a gentle knock at your mud and wattle door. If it's not a neighbor warning about something in the sky, it's probably someone inviting you to the emergency ghost hunting group chat. Medieval small talk after dark is about 90% panic and 10% herbal remedies. Midnight visits are basically never good news. The etiquette handbook for village emergencies is simple. By daylight, fetch a priest or a bucket of water. After dusk, knock softly and bring your own torch. In a time before doorbells, or even reliable shoes, walking through cold puddles at 1 in the morning just meant something was definitely wrong, and probably supernatural. Picture it: you're huddled under a lumpy blanket, dreaming about turnips, when the quiet is shattered by that oh-so-familiar 4-tap knock. But you already know, in the medieval world, nobody comes calling in the dark unless A. someone's lost the family silver, again, B. a cow is delivering twins backwards, or C. the wandering lights have returned to the marsh. The Neighbors at Midnight Club is an exclusive one. Everyone has their own protocol. There are always village characters: old Oswin, perpetually awake rubbing stringy nettle leaves on his joints, or Agnes, who'd rather face a poltergeist than miss the latest scandal. Conversations at midnight are clipped and urgent. You only have a few minutes before word spreads house to house, like an especially contagious cough. Somewhere in the mix, children with half-buttoned tunics clutch kitchen spoons, convinced that if trouble arrives, a wooden spoon is a valid line of defense. It's a medieval relay race, with each update less precise and more alarming. By sunrise, the rumor will have mutated. A single strange bird becomes a flock of flame-eyed specters harassing the baker's wife. Of course, not every nocturnal knock means disaster. Sometimes it means Mrs. Elfrida down the lane brewed too much mead, and now her husband's serenading the moon with psalms. Or the midwife miscounted the new births and needs help telling twins apart. But even then, the air is thick with an odd sense of anticipation. Nothing really good happens in the witching hour, but people come together, trading theories and talismans along with nervous laughter. The best night owl neighbors bring a basket: stale bread for sharing, a lucky pebble, or leftover chive cakes. They stand a respectful 2 paces back from your threshold, nodding gravely. Some bring news from someone who heard it from someone, always careful to add just enough detail to keep the fear fresh. And if, by chance, tonight's emergency is overblown, a wayward owl caught in the church eaves, you and your fellow villagers return to your beds relieved, a little embarrassed, but secretly pleased for the excitement. For the medieval villager, every knock is a crossroads: drama or disaster, fellowship or farce. Either way, you're left wide awake, thinking about locking the door, right after you check your roof for witches. You're basically trying to sleep on top of an overstuffed garnish tray, but if it keeps away the nightmares, and maybe your spouse, it's worth it. Anyone entering your bedroom would think you're auditioning for a role on one of those historical cooking shows, or perhaps just prepping a particularly enthusiastic charcuterie. Your pillowcase smells like it's hosting a secret brunch, and frankly, you haven't seen a moth in weeks. But the way you see it, your botanical fortress is the last defense between your dreams and whatever cosmic trickster keeps sending you sleep paralysis demons shaped suspiciously like your mother-in-law. You didn't start out this way, of course. There was a time when a scented candle felt like a bold choice and lavender sachets were more decor than deterrent. But then you read that burning rosemary might supercharge your dreams, so you're doing your best not to set off the smoke alarm just to find out if you're psychic. If mugwort can keep the old gods at bay and parsley means no more weird, talking raccoons in your REM cycles, then so be it. You consider yourself an experimental botanist now. If it grows in a pot and promises mystic benefits, it's going in your sleep sanctuary. You've also learned that there's a delicate etiquette to herbal magic, a ritual choreography that would leave any chef weeping with joy or horror. Should the bay leaf go under the pillow or over it? Is thyme more effective fresh, or would the spirits be fine with your old flakes from the dollar store? Should you brew that valerian root into a sleepy-time tea, or scatter it like confetti, hoping for a Sandman rave? There's a recipe for everything, it seems, from dream recall to banishing the kind of nighttime visitors that only show up when you eat cheese too late. Admittedly, this new passion for herbal mysticism comes with its own relationship hazards. Sharing a bed is one thing. Sharing a bed with what looks like the produce section, plus the odd garlic braid for extra protection, is another. Your partner, on their side of the mattress, quietly wonders if all that sage smoke is for cleansing the spirits or just an elaborate way to avoid nightly snoring confrontations. You, on the other hand, keep a running tally in your journal. 3 days since the last haunting dream, 1 week since anyone confused your bedroom with a salad bar at a vegan restaurant. You wonder if your herbal haul is working, or if the placebo effect has simply reached its final, fragrant form. Maybe it's a comfort thing, the belief in green magic acting as a psychological lure for peaceful sleep. Maybe it really is casting sleepy spells, warding off spirits and exes alike. Either way, you wouldn't give up your assortment of witches' sleep mix for the world. The pile of jars and bundles on your nightstand aren't just for show. They're a declaration: I am the architect of my own dreams. Still, you accept the occasional herbal accident as the price of nightly mystical security. So as you lie back atop your freshly fluffed, basil-strewn pillow, take pride in your leafy fortress. Maybe the herbs invite sweet dreams, or maybe they simply remind you, between the sneeze attacks and the oregano confetti, that sometimes a little magic is worth a slightly ridiculous mess. After all, if you're going to explore the mysteries of the night, you might as well do it surrounded by nature's finest, and a bedside carafe for the world's weirdest midnight salad. Every creak, gust, and draft is suspicious at best, evil at worst. The wind howling through the cracks is definitely not just weather. You convince yourself it's grandpa playing a prank, or possibly the world's angriest woodland sprite. Either way, you're considering moving to a cave. Of course, rationality insists it's just air molecules doing what air molecules do. After your third horror podcast and half a bag of anxiety-inducing potato chips, logic's taking the night off. The trees outside rattle and groan, branches scraping window panes like the world's least talented violinist. An empty soda can outside rolls across the porch with the determined thud of a small, invisible animal, and you freeze mid-breath, positive you're about to become a local news item. You start second-guessing every little sound. There's an unidentifiable thumping in the ductwork, followed by the whistle of wind squeezing through a gap somewhere above the bathroom fan. Is it just air pressure differentials? Or is it the beginning of the end? You run through worst-case scenario drills that would impress the Pentagon. Step 1. Locate nearest heavy object, possibly the cat. Step 2. Assess escape routes, window versus ill-advised crawlspace dash. Step 3. Pretend this is a charming anecdote you'll someday tell your therapist. What makes wind so peculiarly unnerving is its unpredictability. Rain at least has a rhythm. Pitter, patter, repeat. Wind has moods. Sometimes it sighs. Sometimes it screams. Sometimes it bullies your neighbor's lawn gnome off a ledge, then goes silent, just to keep you guessing. And when the gusts shake a door frame hard enough to rattle the pictures, you start to wonder if maybe you should have installed that cyclone bunker your uncle kept suggesting. The human imagination can't resist filling in the blanks. Wind in the daylight is inconvenient. At night, it transforms into something else entirely. That's just the house settling, people say. But the house has been settling for years and somehow always chooses to do it on the stormiest, darkest nights. It's never at 3 in the afternoon with a cup of tea and the dog for company. No, it's when you're alone, phone battery at 9%, and every horror movie you ever watched comes flooding back. Suddenly, common objects become complicit. Blinds clack like Morse code messages from a haunted ship. A forgotten grocery bag caught in the backyard flutters desperately, signaling, what, exactly? You're not sure, but you know it's not good. Attic insulation that rustles when it shouldn't, lights that flicker at just the wrong moment. Your sense of bravado, so solid when the sun's up, dissolves into a cocktail of adrenaline and regret. Next time, I'll sleep with a baseball bat, you tell yourself. By morning, when everything's calm and the sun glints in through those very same windows, you realize the monster in the night was, in fact, a mild cold front. You laugh it off. You vow, not for the last time, that you will not overreact the next time. But as dusk falls and the first tiny drafts tickle your ankles, you know, deep down, that cave living still sounds pretty good. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments, or if there's a particular beat or joke you want to strengthen. When all else fails, it's time for the local priest to swing by and sprinkle holy water on everything that doesn't move. Exorcisms in the medieval world are both community theatre and community bath day. Try not to get picked as the subject, it's a lot stickier than you'd think. The lead up to an exorcism begins the way all good medieval dramas do, with whispers. Everyone in the village becomes a sleuth, peeking through shutters and muttering half-formed rumors. Someone's cow gave sour milk? Could be the devil. Is old Gertrude muttering to herself again? Clearly, she's been possessed, again. So when the priest is finally summoned, it isn't just spiritual intervention. It's local entertainment, complete with a crowd gathering in anticipation like it's harvest festival with a side of doom. Preparation is not merely spiritual, but practical. Buckets of water are set out, candles are lit, and someone always brings bread. Nobody can resist a loaf, even when evil spirits are being evicted. People jostle for position, children clamber for a peek, and the elders recount the last great exorcism, much more dramatic. As the priest dons his vestments and takes up his holy implements, a hefty book, a jar of oil, and enough incense to set off medieval fire alarms, the villagers murmur in awe. The air thickens with anticipation and the perfumed haze of burning herbs, which, allegedly, only the holiest can endure without coughing. The ritual itself is as much spectacle as substance. The afflicted, often protesting, sometimes resigned, take center stage. Perhaps it's Agnes, wide-eyed and surrounded by a halo of both fear and suspicion. The crowd edges closer, straining to catch every word of the priest's Latin incantations, even if, to their ears, it might as well be beekeeping instructions. As he splashes holy water liberally, a practice that doubles as the annual village face wash, the exorcism oscillates between solemnity and the faintly ridiculous. Candles gutter, dogs bark, the priest's voice rises and falls in rhythms both hypnotic and slightly theatrical. The audience, because at its core, this is a performance, reacts accordingly. Gasps accompany every dramatic gesture. Is the afflicted writhing? That's a promising sign. Has anyone fainted? Excellent. Bonus points if the wind howls ominously, or if chickens scatter in what can only be interpreted as demonic panic. All the while, practical matters hum in the background. Grandmothers nudge the youngest to ensure they're paying attention, and haven't, inconveniently, started speaking in tongues, and bets are quietly placed on whether the evil spirit will require a second round. For many, the outcome is less important than the rare opportunity to come together, gossip with gusto, and watch the village's most sacred rituals play out in technicolor reality. By the climax, when the priest bellows his final command for the devil to depart, the crowd collectively holds its breath. There's always the hope of a visible sign, a sudden recovery, a pronounced shudder, maybe even a chicken returning of its own volition. Failing that, a vague sense of spiritual cleanliness will do. Nobody ever goes home from an exorcism thinking nothing happened. And with the final pronouncement, the villagers disperse, already embellishing the day's events for future retellings, inventing new twists and assigning more drama than perhaps was warranted. In the end, the village exorcism is less about spiritual warfare and more about reaffirming bonds, both sacred and social. It's an excuse to gather, observe tradition, and maybe, just maybe, see something extraordinary. And as the holy water dries and the incense smoke lingers, everyone agrees. Until next time, the devil will just have to wait his turn. When you're feeling off or groggy, don't blame mold, blame spirits. Medieval folk consult everyone from wise women to the sheep, hoping someone can tell them which invisible force is responsible for their headache. Good luck guessing what. Forget bacteria, viruses, or the fact that you haven't seen a vegetable since last Michaelmas. It was clear, the spirits were angry. Perhaps you stepped on a fairy mound, or picked a flower with the wrong hand at dawn. Or maybe, just maybe, the ghost of Old Man Grimsby, never quite right in the head even when alive, fancied a new roommate in your noggin. People didn't come down with illnesses, as much as they were caught in the crosshairs of invisible feuds. Are you lethargic? It probably started when you forgot to toss the first slice of bread to the house spirits or when you grumbled about the blessed rain. Don't you remember what happened to the last person who grumbled? Nobody does. One famous case from 14th century England describes a village where 6 people in a single year became consumed by what's now called sleeping sickness, an almost supernatural torpor that sent them into a state of endless sleep. The local priest declared it was a punishment for missing prayers, the midwife said it was elf shot, and the blacksmith blamed the well water. The only thing everyone agreed on? This needed a lot more candles, chanting, and, for good measure, the ritual slaughter of a very confused chicken. To cure such maladies, the medieval toolkit was varied and imaginative. You could start with a charm written on a scrap of parchment and worn under your nightcap. This innovative approach involved holding a mirror in front of the family sheep to see if its reflection blinked twice, proof positive the house was cursed. Behind the slapstick, though, lay genuine fear and helplessness. With no real understanding of neurological disease, the only option was to seek meaning in the madness. Why did little Margaret fall asleep and never wake? Why did Tom from the next village babble nonsense by the moonlight and die with his eyes open, unseeing? Better to assign blame, spirits, witches, angry fae, than admit no one knew what was happening. Of course, this was fertile ground for charlatans. The wise women with a supply of protective herbs did brisk business, as did the wandering friars, always happy to exorcise a demon for a small donation. Then, leeches. Even sleeping locations were policed for spiritual exposure. Never face your feet toward the doorway, spirits walk in straight lines. Never sleep with your head to the north, elf path. If you must, make sure you've got a protective amulet of wolf's teeth, or, if you couldn't afford it, a potato. But amid the frightening stories and wild remedies was a kind of folkloric logic. Life was unpredictable and dangerous, and wakefulness was a precious, sometimes endangered, commodity. So, if a spirit made you sleepy, at least there was a rulebook, even if it required sacrificing a chicken, wearing questionable jewelry, and reciting every prayer you'd ever half remembered. Science would eventually have its turn, but in the meantime, nobody slept easy, unless a spirit told them to. If you wake up in the yard with muddy feet, you're either A, cursed, B, abducted by fairies, or C, just someone who needs less ale with dinner. But why let facts interfere? Sleepwalking is the one time everyone agrees you're not responsible for what you did last night, unless it was stealing eggs. Still, for everyone else, sleepwalking is this odd quirk to laugh about, until, of course, you catch Uncle Reginald raiding the larder in his nightshirt, talking to the pickles like they're long-lost relatives. Is it embarrassing? Mildly. Is it terrifying? Well, only if you happen to be the pickles. The thing about sleepwalking is how someone transitions from dead as a post to silently gliding down the hallway, eyes open but seeing absolutely nothing. It's the stuff of ghost stories. In fact, let's be honest, if half the poltergeist sightings of the Middle Ages were just Nora from number 12 trying to find the outhouse with her eyes closed, much history would need a rewrite. Imagine telling a medieval village that their midnight gal was actually just a very confused baker looking for yesterday's loaf. Let's pause to appreciate just what sleepwalking gets you out of: chores, arguments, and, sometimes, legal trouble. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card, at least, unless you live with particularly unsympathetic siblings, in which case, your midnight cheese heist will be held against you for the rest of your days. Families have long memories, especially where cheese is concerned. Sounds much fancier, doesn't it? As if it's a secret society you accidentally joined after eating too much mutton before bed. The truth is, sleepwalking was both misunderstood and, on occasion, wildly over-explained. If you lived in the 18th century, they might blame lunar rays, humors, or a shortage of moral resolve. If you live in a college dorm today, it's probably stress, or, let's be honest, cheap pizza. But what about the terrifying bit? Well, have a gander at the casebooks and you'll find tales of people wandering onto rooftops, venturing into woods, or, my particular favorite, trying to saddle up the family goat in the middle of a snowstorm. It seemed like a good idea. They'll mumble in the morning, clutching a handful of hay and a vague sense of embarrassment. Can we blame them? No more than we blame the rooster for crowing at a street lamp. And then there are the clever excuses. To be fair, it rarely works. Parents develop a sixth sense for convenient sleepwalking claims. Still, it's worth a go, especially if your next option is explaining the scorch marks. Scientists, being people who enjoy ruining a perfectly good excuse, have gone and measured brainwaves, poked at petri dishes, and announced that, yes, sleepwalkers are mostly asleep but a bit awake, like being on a carriage with no one at the reins, but the horse thinks it's Tuesday. That's the science. Unfortunately, it offers little comfort to the fence mender who wakes up, inexplicably, in the neighbor's chicken coop. In sum, sleepwalking sits somewhere between party trick and perilous adventure. Is it a clever excuse? Yes, until someone gets hurt, usually your dignity or breakfast supplies. Is it a terrifying reality? For anyone who's woken up with a shovel in hand and no memory of why, most certainly. If nothing else, it gives everyone in the village something to gossip about, which, as we know, is the real point of sleepwalking in the first place. You dreamt of chickens and mud, so you'd better go check the barn for signs of demonic intervention, or just accept you're thinking too hard about breakfast. Medieval dream books are equal parts superstition, folklore, and wild guesses, just like those clickbait personality quizzes. If you have a particularly strange dream, say, being chased by a goat wearing a bishop's mitre, you don't scroll TikTok for an answer. You dig up a battered dream book, or corral the aforementioned neighbor for an on-the-spot consultation. Her methods. Dream books, or oniromancy handbooks, operated like medieval Google, just with more saints and fewer banner ads. Each symbol in your nighttime vision offered a window into your cosmic fate or, at the very least, served as a helpful reminder of why you should never trust turnips. To dream of a bucket is to receive an unexpected guest. To dream of falling teeth? The real charm and confusion of medieval dream interpretation lay in its utter seriousness. A nobleman might lose sleep for weeks over a dream in which eggs rolled off the table, while a peasant saw the same scenario as a sign the hens are done for the season. No one, it seemed, agreed on the what or the why, unless it was to agree that you, the dreamer, probably needed to buy a candle, say 3 prayers, and donate to the nearest monastery. If all else failed, you got a fresh dose of guilt about your dietary choices. These books were, understandably, bestsellers in a time when plagues, wars, and banditry were hobbies. Glossy, literalist, or just plain desperate, aspiring dream interpreters would cross-reference their night terrors with the best resources money could buy. Dream of a burning haystack? Watch out for political upheaval. Dream of a lost shoe. Marriage proposals abound, or, alternately, you're destined for a long walk. The tone of these guides was deadpan and authoritative, but modern readers will spot the tongue-in-cheek undercurrents. Much of what survives is like watching an ancient version of a YouTube astrologer try to keep a straight face while telling you Venus in retrograde means you'll trip over your own feet, but with more saints. These manuals straddled the line between genuine belief and pragmatic entertainment, and probably made for excellent sleepover reading when the night was long and the wolves were howling outside. Still, for all the absurdity, medieval dream interpretation offered an amateur sort of occult counseling. If you were worried, a dream book could provide reassurance, or at least good advice cloaked in superstition. Feeling uneasy about that dream featuring a fish riding a horse? Don't despair, go fishing, avoid horses, and say a few extra prayers. Unlike today's algorithm-powered quizzes, the answers weren't optimized for your data profile, but they did manage to satisfy humankind's oldest instinct, finding meaning in the nonsense. So next time you wake up wondering why your subconscious dragged a parade of barnyard animals through your REM cycle, don't overthink it. Medieval occult counselors would tell you to blame the cheese, sacrifice a candle, and promise yourself an earlier bedtime. Running out of herbs? Fine. Just shove your old shoes under the bed, scares off evil, keeps ghosts confused, nail a bucket to the wall, symbolic, probably, and mutter your favorite nursery rhyme backwards. If all else fails, try moving the bed far away. Welcome to the secret world of supernatural defense, a world where everyday clutter becomes magical armor and household junk is your only line of defense against the void. Not everyone keeps sage by the fistful, and let's be honest, popping over to the store for graveyard dirt is a non-starter unless you want to end up on a government watch list. Luckily, folk magic has your back with improvisation. If you thought protective spells demanded exotic ingredients, think again. Your house is already a minefield of mystical booby traps, if you know where and how to use them. Shoes, the original ghost deterrent. Shoes under the bed. Yes, the shoes you forgot about last spring. Apparently, evil spirits cannot resist a good piece of footwear. Or rather, they find them so perplexing, they get distracted and leave you alone. Weird. Yes. Surprisingly common? Also yes. In folk traditions from England to Appalachia, this shoe warding is supposed to confuse demons or even trap them inside the shoe. Make sure the shoes are old and worn. Pristine sneakers don't seem to impress the spectral crowd. Buckets. Not just for water anymore. Now, about that bucket on the wall, sure, it sounds like a prank pulled on someone new to the job, but the bucket's magic is ancient. In some traditions, a bucket represents containment. It's an invitation for any wandering, ill-meaning force to hop in and stay put. Ideally until you can dispose of it, or until it simply forgets what it was doing and leaves, the supernatural equivalent of opening the fridge and forgetting why. The prudent mystic might even leave the bucket upside down. This apparently prevents anything that does crawl in from crawling back out. Please get a sturdy hook. Last thing you need is spectral backlash plus a concussion. Other bits and bobs, improvised wards for the win. But it doesn't stop at shoes and buckets. Record scratch, there's a whole folklore tradition of using everyday items as spiritual keep-out signs. Want to baffle a banshee? Hang a sieve or a colander by your door. Folk wisdom says spirits are compelled to count the holes before they come in, so with a little luck, and a particularly holy colander, they'll be stuck counting until sunrise, at which point, as everyone knows, they have to bugger off back to Spirit World HQ. Other classics, scattering salt, because spirits loathe tidying up, placing a broom upside down behind the door, either a stern domestic warning or a distraction, no one's sure, or balancing a knife above the threshold, maybe for the aesthetic, maybe to scare away entities with a specific phobia for cutlery. Toss in anything from rusty forks to broken mirrors and you've got a veritable obstacle course for the otherworldly. Why does any of this work? The real power might be psychological. Or maybe ghosts, like raccoons, are just easily befuddled by household junk. Either way, it's better than doing nothing. In conclusion, your home, your rules. So next time you're missing a crystal, don't panic. Just raid your junk drawer. Folk magic is adaptive, weird, and, above all, practical. If you can weaponize your laundry pile against the supernatural, you're already winning. And should you ever wake up to find you've misplaced your shoes, well, maybe that means your uninvited guests finally walked a mile in them. You miss a night's sleep and your mind is a mess. The obvious solution? Blame Olga the milkmaid, who probably jinxed you while gossiping about your weird collection of sticks. Witch trials, because you can't be cranky without blaming someone. But scapegoating isn't just reserved for restless nights and misplaced household items. In every tight-knit community, medieval Europe being a prime case study, unexplained misfortunes almost always needed a human cause. Plague. Someone had to bring it. A cow gives sour milk? There's someone behind this lactose treason. And who better to pin it on than Olga, who just so happens to wear her braid differently and never attends the midsummer bonfire? Suspicion, after all, thrives on difference, especially when you're desperate for order in a chaotic world. The role of the scapegoat is a strange sort of backhanded compliment. It takes a special kind of unremarkable unpopularity to get blamed for every toe stub and ruined harvest. Olga, and her milkmaid kin across Europe, had daily lives carefully scrutinized from behind curtains and over fence posts. If you tripped on your doorstep, it probably had nothing to do with your own clumsiness. It was definitely some muttered curse as Olga passed the well that morning. In communities where scientific explanation was thin on the ground but rumors grew like weeds, being different or simply there at the wrong time could qualify you for the title of town jinx, complete with all the job hazards, like public shaming and 0 days off. Naturally, witch trials took this impulse and ran with it, giving centuries of ordinary grievances the theatre they craved. Remember, you can't form a proper mob without a villain, and milkmaids made for easy targets. Who else had both the means, access to livestock and babies, and the motives, envy over Maria's superior Sunday bonnet? Plus, milkmaids already had a slight ethnic mystique. They were on the move, visiting multiple households, gossiping, spreading news, spreading, perhaps, something more. If a glass of milk curdled overnight, or a child woke up with nightmares, it wasn't about bacteria or bedtime stories. The real culprit was usually someone else, conveniently not you. As the drama unfolded, accusations spiraled and stories grew in the telling. That shadow you saw last night? Olga, obviously, casing the vegetable patch for beets to hex. The sudden rainstorm? She probably caused that too, humming those strange songs under her breath. In a world without cameras, stats, or weather apps, the truth was whatever the majority whispered the loudest. And hey, believing Olga was at fault was easier than accepting that life is sometimes messy, random, and utterly beyond your control. All this drama served a neatly practical purpose. Scapegoating pulled communities together, giving everyone a shared enemy. Bonding, medieval style, meant locking arms against whoever looked suspicious, and, for one short, cathartic spell, believing you've stamped out chaos. Never mind reality. As long as you could gossip loudly enough to drown out your doubts, you'd sleep a little better, confident that the dark forces had been flushed out, at least until your next bad night's sleep, when you'd need a new milkmaid to blame. So, if you ever feel picked on for some inexplicable reason, remember, you're part of an ancient, hallowed tradition of being blamed for other people's bad luck. The milkmaids would understand. In fact, they might even have a few survival tips they picked up along the way, like keeping your braids tidy and your gossip even tidier, just in case the wind shifts and the crowd decides it's your turn to be the villain in their midnight stories. If sleep still won't come, pack up and shuffle to the nearest saint's shrine. Mumble a few prayers, leave an offering, and try not to trip over the other desperate insomniacs. Religious tourism, like a sleep clinic, but holier and a lot less effective. There's a particular way your feet sound at 2 in the morning. Unsteady, unwilling. You swear the cobblestones are judging you, their centuries-old smoothness worn less by divine procession than by the shuffling of countless other souls seeking solace, or just a semblance of rest. The familiar route to the shrine has a different character at this hour, dressed in shadows, steered by moonlight bouncing off polished brass and chipped marble. The holy site sits like a bastion of final hope, lit by a confetti of votive candles still bravely holding their ground against the dew and darkness. You're not alone, of course. The communal insomniac shuffle is a parade of the world's loneliest night owls. There's the fumbling old man in slippers too big and a coat too thin, the mother with a toddler swaddled against her shoulder, both wide-eyed, the priest himself, stifling a yawn behind the confessional grill. You nod, acknowledging the unsaid. We, the sleepless, gather here as pilgrims not so much of faith, but of desperation. There's a camaraderie to it, an unspoken fellowship bound by shared fatigue and hope that someone, somewhere, might intercede on our slack-jawed behalf. At the entrance, the offerings linger on the steps, wilted posies, stray coins, a packet of crackers, even a novelty mug, world's best grandma, from someone who presumably hit rock bottom in the gift shop. You fumble for change, wish it were luck, and leave both in the same tin. The rituals for insomnia are pleasingly vague. Cross yourself with wild ambiguity, squint at the icon, mumble something that's equal parts prayer and complaint, please, just let me sleep, and hope the saint on duty isn't predisposed against skeptics. Inside, the frescoes stare back, painted eyes unblinking, undeceived by your half-hearted devotion. You're supposed to feel inspired to transcendence, but the nearest you get is a momentary distraction as you follow the mural's narrative, saints curing the ailing, or defeating cartoonish demons. You envy their sense of purpose. Here, mortality is painted with flourishes, sanctity depicted as a battle against invisible enemies. Perhaps tonight, Saint Insomnia, there must be one, is fighting the sleeplessness on your behalf. You find a pew, its wood seasoned by centuries of drowsy supplicants, and settle in to negotiate terms with the universe. Eyes closed, you attempt a mindful inventory of your surroundings. Incense that smells faintly electrical, the soft crack of candle wax, a neighbor's whispered agitations. The centerpiece relic, a knuckle bone, a scrap of robe, part of an eyebrow, depending on the shrine's celebrity status, radiates the kind of occult energy that, if nothing else, suggests you're not the worst-off human in history. The priest shuffles out, delivering a practiced blessing in the low monotone of a man who knows exactly how much sleep he's missing out on. A collective murmur of thank yous wafts upward, hopeful and half asleep. For a moment, you think you might finally nod off, meditative, serenely guided by faith or exhaustion. But then someone's phone buzzes. Someone coughs. The world rushes back in, reminding you that even in this sanctified space, the night's rest is stubbornly elusive. So you rise, knees aching, spirits just slightly soothed by ritual and company. As you leave, you promise the saint another visit if tonight's miracle doesn't materialize, and leave your insomnia behind, if only for the duration of the cool walk home, under the watchful gaze of stone saints and insomniac stars. Sleep just out of reach, you count the slow toll of the midnight bell. Every clang is both comfort and warning. Curfew means the streets are now for the living, the dead, and those with really urgent bladder problems. The bell's echo rolls through stone alleys, weaving around shuttered windows and resting heavy on door lintels. It's an ancient kind of sound, a sort of sonic border that separates yesterday from today, or more accurately, before curfew from after. Out here, rules are ancient and unspoken. The living keep to their beds, and the restless, well, they keep to the shadows. At first, you think it's the bell itself that's heavy, weighing down on your eyelids. But no, the feeling stems from old stories, warnings whispered in schoolyards and arclit kitchens. Everyone knows someone who wandered after the final toll, and not all of them returned unchanged. The streets after midnight take on a different personality. Lamp posts cast longer shadows, and even the stray cats tiptoe. For the unlucky few still outside, maybe the apprentice baker who lost track of time, or the night soil collector whose job is nobody's dream, it's curfew brinkmanship. Each clang means one chance less to slip home unscathed. Superstition says the final bong is not just for marking time, but for marking who made it inside. The unlucky feel eyes watching, though whether they belong to over-caffeinated watchmen or to something colder is best left unasked. You peer through a cracked shutter. On dark nights, the bell seems the only real thing, its metallic voice flattening every other sound. Dogs know better than to bark. Even spirits, the local stories go, abide by this curfew. A haunting past midnight is bad etiquette, your aunt said once, folding laundry with one ear cocked for the bell. The ghosts, apparently, have some manners. Best not to embarrass their afterlife social circles by breaking curfew. There is a comfort in this ritual. Every household waits for it, marks the days by it, trusts its sound as much as the morning rooster or the market crier. With every toll, parents tuck their children in tighter and drunks hurry up their nonsense so they can stagger home before final call. Even the innkeeper glances at the clock with a practiced sigh, counting down to a silence as surely as closing the register drawer. Yet for all its reassurance, there's a lingering question. Who's the bell really for? The living, who need order. The dead, who need structure. Or simply something older still, an uneasy truce drawn between both? While you drift at the edge of sleep, the weight of tradition's centuries old hums in your bones. The world outside is not yours for the taking right now. The bell has sealed it, at least until morning. In the hush that follows the last echo, you turn over and try to ignore the urge for just one last look outside. After all, even the ghosts respect the bell. And you? You'd rather share your bedroom with creaking floorboards than test the patience of midnight, bladder problems notwithstanding. Eventually, after hours of negotiating with your own anxiety, the rooster crows and the shadows pull back. Ghosts, witches, and nightmares retreat for another day, leaving you to face real life, chores, bad porridge, and suspiciously smug neighbors. The early hours always feel like a ceasefire, a halting of all those small, personal wars that erupted under cover of darkness. Somehow, your bedroom, site of so much nighttime drama, feels unremarkable in the diluted grey light seeping through faded curtains. What was so terrifying about your chair, that inky thing hunched in the corner now quietly balancing a pile of laundry? With the sun's return, even the menacing tree branch outside your window, the one that clawed at the pane with nightmarish persistence, looks more like the world's saddest scarecrow than a sorcerer's finger-scratching warnings. You shuffle to the kitchen, blankets dragging behind you like the train of an exiled monarch. There's a relief in the ordinariness, but also an odd emptiness, as if the vanquished ghosts have vacuumed up some crucial part of the night. It's safe, but almost disappointing. Wasn't there, just hours ago, a sense of possibility in the darkness? Now all that's left is the grim inevitability of the day, porridge that tastes like defeat, neighbors who already seem to know what happened in your dreams, and chores, those cruel reminders that the real world is not an enchanted one. But maybe that's the magic of dawn. Nothing is quite as urgent, as electrifying, or as catastrophic in daylight. The monsters under your bed clock out with a professional air, punching time cards and giving each other knowing nods. Good shift. You can almost hear them mutter, rolling up leftover dread and tucking it neatly away for the next night. Your mind, once a haunted house, is now just a slightly messy living room. Outside, the world is clearly unbothered by your internal battles. The sun rises as if nothing has happened. Your neighbor, the one who always has suspiciously flawless hair at 6 a.m., waves over her hedge. She offers a smile so impossibly arch that you suspect she's in on the secret. Maybe she, too, tames nightmares between brushing her teeth and watering her tomatoes. Or maybe she's simply immune to such nonsense, her sleep unbroken by spectral visitors. You eat breakfast, marveling at the absolute normalcy. There is a strange comfort in the click of the spoon against your bowl, the whir of the kettle, the clatter of the post through the letterbox. Each sound insists that everything is perfectly ordinary, even if just hours ago you were certain the world was ending, again. Routine becomes its own kind of exorcism, each familiar act chasing away cobwebbed phantoms from the edges of your mind. Still, as you lace your shoes and attempt to become a functional member of society, you wonder about those ghosts. Where do they go during the day? Do they haunt the hallways of your memory, curling up with your old mistakes and forgotten fears? Or do they simply dissolve in the sunlight, leaving only a tingle in the air, the faintest trace of adventure past? The answer doesn't matter, not really. What matters is that dawn has arrived, and for now you're safe. The world with all its imperfections welcomes you, bleary but unbroken, to another round. Somewhere down the street, another survivor of the night's anxieties opens a curtain and squints into the morning light, their own ghosts dismissed until dusk. You nod silently, part of an unspoken fellowship, a legion of the newly woken, bound not by fear, but by the knowledge that, night after night, you will always make it to dawn. Morning means endless gossip about who survived the night, who didn't, and what in the world that dream about dancing mules meant. You try to play it cool and blame the cheese, but everyone knows, nighttime in the medieval world is only half about sleep, and all about survival. As the first pale light seeps through warped shutters, the real drama begins, not in the dark, but around the smoky fire where breakfast simmers. Forget snooze buttons or news alerts. The medieval equivalent is Ida the innkeeper loudly recounting how her third cousin nearly suffocated in his own feather bed, only to be saved by a particularly assertive chicken. Around battered tables and cracked goblets, every villager becomes a master storyteller, trading last night's nightmares like prized relics. The baker swears his midnight cramp was a demon's pinch. The miller claims his dreams were blessed, based on waking up with crusty crumbs beneath his nose. And if anyone dares mention something truly bizarre, like that time brother Alfred woke up outside, hugging the church's stone gargoyle, they all nod with grave understanding. In a world where sleepiness could be a sign of spirits, no one takes such stories lightly. Of course, there's always that one know-it-all, the village cheesemonger, armed with strong opinions, and even stronger Stilton, who insists it's all dietary. She blames the night's terrors on blue cheese's mysterious molds or the rash consumed after sunset. If you stumbled to the privy in the dark and imagined a ghost tugging your nightshirt, chances are you'll be told it was just curds talking. Your reply? Nod sagely, but keep your hand on a garlic clove, just in case. Beneath the laughter, though, is an undercurrent of shared relief. Survival isn't guaranteed, dreams feel like messages from gods or devils, and every new dawn is a communal tally of who made it through. Small triumphs over restless spirits and nocturnal ailments become breakfast victories, celebrated with crude bread and sharper wit. Rumors swirl faster than the embers flicker. Was that scream last night the washerwoman fending off a ghost, or just her latest lover sneaking out the window? Did the squire's shadow really twist into a werewolf, or was it the dog, jealous over last crumbs? Everyone has theories, nobody has proof, and all evidence evaporates with the morning stew. By midday, whatever happened in the night morphs into legend, embroidered until even the cheesemonger's stories sound mild. But the root of these breakfast rituals goes beyond entertainment. In a world where nighttime was truly perilous, sharing stories served as both therapy and survival guide, and mistakes catalogued with self-deprecating flair. It wasn't just gossip, it was a how-to manual for not dying of nightmares, superstitions, or damp feet. So, by the time sunlight fully claims the village square, you've had your fill of burnt toast, dubious wisdom, and more ghost stories than anyone should need before noon. So tonight, as you nestle under clean sheets with precisely 0 haunted goats and a solid bedroom door, take a moment for grateful reflection. Your ancestors spent centuries wrestling insomnia with nothing but bad advice, garlic, and holy water, and they survived, if only just. Medieval nights were grim, confusing, and so stuffed with superstitions they make modern TikTok wellness hacks look tame. People back then didn't just endure restless sleep or bad dreams, they chased away the shadows with every wild trick they knew, be it a shoe under the bed, a prayer for the cat, or blaming the milkmaid. But here you are, centuries later, still falling asleep to voices in the dark, just now piped through wireless headphones instead of haunted rafters. So, as you drift off tonight, remember, you owe your uninterrupted sleep to the stubborn, slightly unhinged, and relentlessly hopeful humans who weathered each medieval midnight so you wouldn't have to. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and rest easy. History's ghosts are finally off the clock. So tonight, as you nestle under clean sheets with precisely 0 haunted goats and a solid bedroom door, take a moment for grateful reflection. Your ancestors spent centuries wrestling insomnia with nothing but bad advice, garlic, and holy water, and they survived, if only just. Medieval nights were grim, confusing, and so stuffed with superstitions they make modern TikTok wellness hacks look tame. People back then didn't just endure restless sleep or bad dreams, they chased away the shadows with every wild trick they knew, be it a shoe under the bed, a prayer for the cat, or blaming the milkmaid. But here you are, centuries later, still falling asleep to voices in the dark, just now piped through wireless headphones instead of haunted rafters. So, as you drift off tonight, remember, you owe your uninterrupted sleep to the stubborn, slightly unhinged, and relentlessly hopeful humans who weathered each medieval midnight so you wouldn't have to. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and rest easy. History's ghosts are finally off the clock. Good night.